On behalf of the city of Chicago, I apologize for the historic wrongs committed against Black people in Chicago. I stand here today proud to sign an executive order that creates the Reparations Task Force to support the strategy, the implementation, and the engagement of Chicago Black reparations agenda.
Welcome back to GMA3. That's the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, announcing an executive order for a new reparations task force in the city. The task force would look for ways to address the policies that have harmed Black Chicago residents from the era of slavery to today.
And the mayor announcing that $500,000 has been set aside for studies towards reparations and restoration. Joining us now is the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hello, thanks for having me. I appreciate the time.
So let's talk about this task force. Exactly how will this task force work?
Well, it's important to first of all lift up the fact that this executive order does a couple of things. Again, it forms this task force with the sole purpose of providing support for strategy, implementation, and engagement around what a Black reparations agenda will look like. It also acknowledges the harm that institutional slavery, Jim Crow, and post-civil rights policies have caused to Black Chicagoans in particular. And the task force ultimately has the responsibility to do five things. One, it has to, first of all, have a real complete analysis around the policies that have harmed Black Chicagoans. Two, it has to have a real commitment to engage and educate the public. Three, it has to identify where there actually can be redress, whether it be around education, healthcare, housing.
Now, Mayor Johnson, how will you define success in this endeavor, and what roadblocks do you expect to encounter?
Well, that's another one of the goals of the task force, and I should have mentioned that earlier, that part of the task force responsibility is to actually come up with a clear definition and framework around reparations. The success will ultimately be determined by how we implement the recommendations that come directly from Chicagoans. Look, over the course of decades in the city of Chicago, public schools have been closed, public housing has been shut down, pensions have been raided, those dollars have been delivered over to corporations to line their own pockets. I mean, those are just some of the examples of how these policies have harmed Black Chicagoans.
I have to ask you more about the crime that's happening in Chicago. It's, makes headlines all across the country on a regular basis. How are you addressing that violence in your city? And are you at all concerned about protests this summer as the Democratic convention is going to be there?
Well, I'm really excited about the Democratic Convention. I've said from the very beginning, my goal is to make sure that there are peaceful and safe protests, while also making sure that we have a vibrant, energized convention that's going to ultimately launch President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris back into the White House for another 4 years to continue to invest in working people.
Mayor, before we let you go, you've recently expanded the Emergency Supplemental Victims Fund that provides families who've lost a loved one to gun violence with $1,500. But how are you ensuring and assuring the citizens of your city of their safety?
How I'm approaching this is from a very working class standpoint. I'm the first mayor in the history of Chicago to wake up and go to bed in one of the most violent neighborhoods in the city of Chicago. I'm raising my family on the west side, my wife and I, 3 children, and I can tell you it grips our hearts every single day when we see the loss of life. But this is not something that intimidates me. We're going to continue to work to bring everyone together, the business community, the philanthropic community, community-based organizations, full investment from my administration, making sure we're holding people accountable, but also making sure that we're creating opportunities for the people of Chicago. That's how we secure a better, stronger, safer Chicago.
All right, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you both.